Live. We're gonna go ahead and start it out as folks begin filtering in. Looks like Reem the Real Steven. Good afternoon. Is MAGA 2024 in jeopardy? That is what we're talking about. That might be enough to run some folks out of the room. But as folks begin coming in here, I'm going to assume that a lot of you folks are not watching the coverage of what took place on January 6th, but you should be. You absolutely should be. Good afternoon, Sugarnomics and Rini, the Rue. Good evening or good afternoon. You should be watching it. I see Danny Verse said you're watching it. As a patriotic American, you should be watching that. Now, I understand that a lot of my audience, you know who my audience is. I always have to let you know my preferred audience is MAGA. A lot of you folks already have your mind made up. The election was not held properly. Perhaps you believe Trump was the victor, whatever the case may be. If you have made your mind up before hearing the other side present evidence, you're biased. When 2000 Mules came out, I had several of my followers, my viewers, listen, 2000 Mules shows you what you need to see. You need to watch this documentary. There is no way I could come up and say, well, 2000 Mules is BS. I don't even need to see it. Then that's a biased opinion. Allow Dinesh D'Souza to present the evidence before making your opinion. Same thing with Mike Lindell. Watch the Cyber Symposium. Allow him to present the evidence before making your opinion. At least that way it's fair. If you have that mindset, but then when it comes to the hearing they're holding now on January 6th, you choosing not to watch it, then you're biased. You are biased. Allow them to also present the evidence. And if you side with Trump or if you side with the liberals, then that's it. But you should at least watch the evidence. And there's too many folks, particularly amongst my MAGA crowd, that are just simply saying, I'm not even going to watch it. I will tell you this, folks. Just because you're not watching this does not mean it's not happening. And they're going to make a ruling based on what's being presented here. Just want to tell you that. It's funny because they say it's Black Lives Matter and Antifa, but don't want to watch and see if they were involved. Excellent point. Excellent point. Riding with Biden, 48 boy. I'm watching the hearings, and to put it in a nutshell, Trump wanted to throw out the black vote. Wow. Don't watch it says, I'm just reading the comments. Before I go to the box is open. It's not evidence, it's fabrication. User 879. Let me just point this out. What's really looking bad, at least for Trump, is the fact that there are so many folks in his own inner circle that are presenting counter evidence. It would be like holding a drug operation or a criminal enterprise, and they have a bunch of snitches coming out that used to work with you. You can't rule all of that out as just being fabrication. They got his attorney, they got his campaign manager, they got his daughter, they got Jim Barr. It's too many folks that he hired, he vetted, he appointed that's talking about him. If you had a drug case and all of the leaders, his lieutenants, his drug runners, all of these folks are in court testifying against him, it doesn't look good. It does not look good. They're not presenting a whole bunch of liberals. It's not Nancy Pelosi up there testifying against them or AOC. It's his own people. All right, looking in the comments. Better yet, looking at the boxes open. The chunky cake will start out with you. We're gonna make it. Listen, folks. I want to see both sides of an argument. That's all I'm asking. Don't convict. Don't exonerate. Be able to listen to both sides. The chunky Cajun. Good afternoon.
What's up, Bo?
None at all. Have you watched any of this?
No, I ain't watching that.
Okay. Go ahead.
If they're not going to do anything about the months and months of riots and the hundreds of dead police officers that happened during the BLM and Antifa riots, but they're gonna tout this thing like it's some kind of insurrection. They try to overthrow the country. Then I'm not listening to that because it's ridiculous.
So let me ask you this question. So your point is, if you let the Antifa and Black Lives Matter people get away with what they did, you should let Trump get away with or MAGA get away with what they did as well. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think in comparison, what Antifa and them did is far worse for our country than what anybody thought Trump did. I think Trump sat up there and said peacefully protest. I think that doesn't get played enough. And I'm not a huge Trump fan, but I mean, in general, I don't think it's what they're trying to make it out to be. I I'm more upset at the cowardice of the Republican Party than I am anything else. I think it's time for the Republican Party to stop playing nice and stop trying to play. It's time for the Republican Party to stop being gracious in defeat. It's time for them to
Okay.
start playing ugly like the Democrat does.
Okay, well, with all due respect, when you look at what happened on January 6th, or even when you look at what happened in the state of Michigan regarding the mask mandates and them surrounding the Capitol building, I don't see where Republicans are playing nice. They're doing exactly what you suggested. It's time to play hardball. That's not what
Now,
happened on January 6th is not playing nice. But go ahead.
what happened on January 6th, I mean, there's video of guards opening the doors and allowing me in. One person died. One person. You have multiple deaths when it comes to Antifa. Multiple. And
Okay.
look, realistically, in my opinion, it's if you're going to call out one side, and this is where I do I think people need to be charged with trespassing? Absolutely. Do I think people, I think if anybody did anything violent, they needed to be charged. The only one who was violent was that officer that shot that woman. And that woman was coming through a window, and that was it. That was the only violent act that was done
So
upon
so your
police.
so your contention is the only act of violence is the officer shooting a woman, but you don't see any violence in them breaking windows and busting in places. You don't see any of that as being violent.
I think in Portland they had a 30-day siege on the state building, and nobody said anything, and it was Antifa and
Okay,
thing.
let me. Fair enough on the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa race. I get your reference to Chaz, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is if you commit a crime and you're being tried, pointing to other folks who have gotten away with crimes in the past is not going to help your current defense,
Yeah,
even
but
if it's
when
true. Even if
but when
it's true.
you have a State Department that is going after all these people like they did some kind of seditious, horrible thing when nobody was really in danger, versus the death. Look up who David Dorn is. If nobody's going to do anything about his murder, and he was murdered. He was murdered while they were robbing a store, and he was trying to protect people. And he was a black police officer with a 30-year history, and they're doing nothing about it. But a bunch of stupid ass white people went into a, like, I'm talking in the hundreds, but you have thousands of people rioting, and you're going to tell me that's more important, and that's sedition, that's trying to overthrow the government. And if you look at it, the reason they were doing that was because they were trying to get it constitutionally done right. They were trying to get them to pass the vote down to the states, which is a constitutional right. They weren't trying to say that Trump won. They were trying to get him to throw the votes down to the states.
Okay. Okay. I get your point. By the way, folks who are watching this, we typically have fairly good content on this channel. Tap your screen, get my likes up. Everyone gets to speak. I don't have to agree. Folks do not have to agree with me. Free speech is not banned on this broadcast. We do this every day. In regards to what you're suggesting, I guess I cannot point out any stronger that bringing up events that are not being discussed, even if you're 100% correct, they're not going to help this particular mission. Every day, people get tried with things, convicted of things that other folks in the past have gotten away with. That bringing that stuff up, it's just a diversion. They're going to toss that out of court the minute you bring it up, even if it's legitimate. But in
Well, I'm
regards to
not
what's
bringing it up.
taking,
I'm not bringing it up in a judicial sense. I'm bringing it up in an American sense that we should have an issue with the fact that they're attacking something that is not what they're making it out to be. It's just not. I mean, it's not. It was not. It was not this uber violent thing. It was basically what that coach said. It was a dust up. It was just a bunch of people aggravated with a situation. And I fully agree that the people who did things wrong, if you want to charge them with trespassing, I agree with that, and they should face the full brunt of that.
what about the notion that while folks are chanting for Mike Pence to be violently executed, Trump is reported as saying maybe he deserves that, maybe the crowd has it right.
Do
What
you
do
have
you
any
take
proof of
on
that?
that?
Do you have any proof of that?
And that's a good point. And that's why I asked you originally, and folks in the audience, are you watching the actual trial? If you're not watching the trial, a lot of this stuff is going by, And if you've already made your mindset, when you have proof of that, they're presenting this stuff. That's what I'm talking
Okay,
about. It's just
but
like with 2000.
somebody's
Hold on,
somebody's
hang on a second. Hold
testimony.
on. Let me just say this. Just like with 2000 Mules, just like with Mike Lindell's insurrection or Mike Lindell's cyber symposium, I told folks on the liberal side of the aisle, regardless if you believe what Trump is saying is true or false, at least watch Mike Lindell, watch Dinesh D'Souza, and make your opinion based on what they're presenting. If you just are totally ignoring what they have to say as a bunch of hogwash, then you're making a biased opinion. That's what's happening now. If you're not watching this stuff and you already have your mind made up without even listening to what they're presenting, then you're making a, because they're presenting new stuff. As a citizen, you and I, we don't have access to what they have access to. So at the very least, listen to what they have access to, and then you can dismiss it as BS or whatever, but you need to at least hear it. Go ahead.
What well, tell me this. What are they presenting beyond somebody saying it was said that is actual proof? Do they have a recording? Do they have video of it?
They got video of his daughter suggesting that he did not win. They got video of his lawyer saying that they told him you did not win. The evidence is not there. They got video of his attorney general saying that your claims are BS and they're harmful to the country. I mean,
But that's not
what
what you
more do
said.
you need?
That's not what you said. You said that they were presenting evidence that he told them to go in there and to try to overthrow. What I'm asking is beyond, no matter what, an opinion is not, their opinion is not fact. And look, I'm not even saying he won the election. I'm not saying that he won the election. I'm not saying that what those people did was right. It was absolutely 100% wrong. I'm not saying that. And do I think, and let me repeat, do I think they need to be held accountable for their actions? Absolutely. But
That's
when
not what we're talking about here, though. We're not talking about the rioters. We're talking about the notion that Trump continued telling the country the election was stolen, even though everyone close to him was telling them, no, it is not,
yeah,
and telling them this is harmful for you to keep saying this. That's what we're
but that doesn't
talking
mean he
about.
doesn't have a right to say it.
If you, that's like yelling fire in a crowded theater. If
No,
you
it's not.
know
It is.
hold on a second, hold on. If everybody close to you, the folks who are responsible for fact checking on your behalf, such as your attorney general, if they're telling you there is no evidence of this happening, and you continue suggesting it anyway based on zero evidence at that point, you're telling me there's nothing wrong with that?
I'm telling you that first off, if he believes it and he believes the evidence in front of him presents it, he has a right to say it. And it's not a yelling fire. It's not yelling fire in a crowded room. It's his opinion on the situation. And if he has evidence to back it up, I'm not saying he does or he doesn't because I watched 2000 Mules. To me, if that's not some kind of proof of something fishy. And look, I'm okay. Everybody has a problem with Trump. Everybody has a problem with Trump and wants to label him a racist. There's in the 1990 hearings for Clarence Thomas, your current president sat on there and used the N word in front of Clarence Thomas how many times, and nobody calls him a racist. You really, and look, I didn't vote for Obama. I felt Obama's policies were horrible and terrible, but I understood why people voted for him because he's a very intelligent man. He's very well read, and and you can listen to him and you can tell he has a brain. You will never convince me as a person that Joe Biden got more votes than Barack Obama. The world does not
And
hate Donald that much.
that's fair enough. And that's fair enough. And that's the point I'm trying to make is that if you are approaching this with the locked in notion, as you just said, you will never be able to convince me of anything else. Then yeah, what you're admitting I have permanent bias. I don't care what they present at court.
I do.
You're
I,
never going to convince me otherwise. I mean, you
I
just
believe.
suggested that, right?
Now wait, hold on. Now I didn't say he didn't win. I just said you'll never convince me he got that many votes. I'm not saying he didn't get enough votes to win. I'm saying you'll never convince me. But I will say this: there's been more than enough proof that they meddled that there's been meddling with the election. Now, is it enough to overturn the election? Probably not. I don't know. I'm not. I'm
Then
not.
why Then why is Trump suggesting that he won by a landslide? Is there more than enough proof for him to say that?
In my opinion,
Yeah.
I don't know because I don't know what proof he has. I know what I saw if I know what I saw in 2000 mules, that's more than enough proof, in my opinion, to where the election could have been overturned. But I know, like,
Well, I've seen 2,000 Mules a half dozen times, and I will tell you another thing that you're missing out by not watching this is the fact that they are debunking 2,000 Mules in this as well. But
I've
I
watched
will say this
video I
in
could.
regards to, huh?
I've watched every debunked video I could on 2000 mules, and I didn't take it at face value.
Okay, well, and there's nothing I can do about that. But what I'm just simply saying is that Um, if you go with 2,000 Mules, even 2,000 Mules showed you evidence that there may have been some impropriety with the election, but nothing in 2,000 Mules showed you that Trump won by a landslide. I did several live broadcasts on 2,000 Mules, and one of the things I made clear is that in the movie they showed 2,000 Mules, an average of five ballots each, and they came up with allegedly 380,000 illegal ballots. Nowhere in the movie did they make it clear that 100% of those ballots were for Biden. They're showing folks supposedly stuffing ballot boxes at 3 a.m., returning to ballot boxes multiple times and doing things that look very shady. What they're in the movie, what they're just simply alleging and just literally making a leaps and bounds assumption on is that 100% of fraud in the 2020 election came from liberals, and that makes
That's
no
not
sense.
true. That's not
You,
true. As a matter of fact, there's multiple interviews with Dinesh D'Souza where he says that we're not saying this all 100% went for Joe Biden. We're saying that this being done is sketchy and it
I'm not
shouldn't
talking
be.
about an interview. I'm talking about in the movie. In the movie, they don't say anything about Trump
They,
potentially or there were cheaters for Trump. They're saying it's all liberals.
I mean, if you look at the mail-in vote, it almost 100% went to Biden.
Okay. Well, like I said, we can go back and forth on it. The movie did
But
not
I,
prove that.
I need you to own up to the fact that that's 100% true. Almost 100%, over 90% of the mail-in vote went to Biden. It's 100% true.
Yeah. Yeah, most of the mail-in vote went to Biden, but not all of it. Not all of it. The
Over
movie paints it as if 100% of all of the fraud
so
was
as
done in favor of Biden.
in the movie and in interviews, the people who did it and Dinesh D'Souza have stated that they're not saying that, and that they're implying that there's something wrong with this process and this process got abused. And they're not
Well,
saying it went one side or the other. They're
yes,
saying that
they
the
are.
process
Yes,
got
they are.
abused.
I actually, for my live broadcast, I actually screenshotted the movie when I did my live broadcast. There is an actual screenshot from the movie where they show 2,000 mules, an average of five ballots each, and they tally it up and say 380,000 illegal votes, and they tally that up for Biden. They don't say nothing about any cheating for Trump. They don't
because
even
because
investigate.
of
Hold on.
the
They don't even investigate.
the,
They don't even investigate mailboxes in Republican neighborhoods. They went to Detroit, Milwaukee, Phoenix. They didn't even go to Republican neighborhoods to even check for fraud.
well, the way they did it with the cell phone data, that's where it ended up at. That's where the cell phone data pointed at. It didn't point in the other districts. It pointed in that. As cell phone data was not done in specific districts. It was done on a nationwide thing. And look,
And how do you know? How do you know, as someone who would not trust the media, who could see the bias from CNN or the bias from MSNBC? How do you? How could you automatically trust someone as biased as Dinesh D'Souza? How could you believe that the data that gentleman analyzed in Truth to Votes? Did you ever ask, well, where's the chain of custody on that data? How do we know that data is accurate?
well,
All
look, now
I'm just simply
straw man.
saying is,
Let's be honest. You straw man because you don't want the facts to be true. That's just kind of that's almost like you admitting that you've lost the argument. You can't deny that 90%, that over 90%, close to 100% of all mail-in votes came in for Biden. You can't deny that they shut down voting. They shut down voting in the middle of the night, and Trump was up by massive amounts. And then when voting came back, boom, Biden won. That's not fishy to you. That's not, and I'm not saying that it's right or it's wrong. I'm saying, like, if we don't investigate that, and we don't investigate that as hard as we investigate a bunch of idiots who broke into the Capitol. I say broke in. They opened the damn door and let them in. We don't invest. We
so
invest.
you're suggesting that,
We,
so you're suggesting that everybody was in the Capitol building, nobody broke in, they were all just let in.
I'm telling you that we investigating this thing, which happened, far more than we're actually investigating things that are coming up that are just extremely fishy, that we as Americans be like, no, that ain't right. And left or right, that ain't right. Because left or right, you should want free and fair elections. And I
Okay.
repeat, it's just, if you look at where he's at right now, and you cannot look at Biden and listen to that man talk and tell me he's competent to be president of the United
Okay.
States.
Now well, listen. Now you got to move it on. Other people are in the box. We can agree to disagree. I'm just simply saying I would implore you or anyone else, at the very least, to at least watch the hearings. You can stay with the opinion you're making. That is your total right to be objective in what you're seeing. But at the very least, before making a complete opinion, you should see it. That's all I'm saying. I
Appreciate it.
appreciate you coming through, man.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Wait. Okay, I got to move. Why it's totally BS. Well, Chick, there is information coming out. I mean, do you really believe that everything Attorney Jim Barr is saying is BS, or his daughter, Ivanka Trump? If you believe everything is BS, then you have a preconceived notion of bias. I met liberals that felt the same way about 2,000 Mules. If you want to claim that you're viewing this from a position of fairness, you should at least watch it before developing your opinion. Let me Pokey, what is this? Pokey Talk Time. Good afternoon.
Hey, how you doing? Love your lives. I
Thank you.
just wanted to just make a few statements and then kind of get into the January 6th thing. I think the Trump presidency to me proved one of two things, right? That
Okay.
either the government is so corrupt that even an outsider can't make real change, or that Trump wasn't really an outsider at all, and it was pretty much business as usual in Washington, D.C. So in either of those cases, to me, it doesn't make sense to bring Trump back into the office. So that's
I
my
will say, interesting point. I will say your first statement about Washington is so corrupt that an outsider can't make change. I can't speak totally on your second statement, but that is absolutely true. Otherwise, you'd probably have progressives like Bernie Sanders or some libertarians in there. It is very difficult for an outsider because it's all money oriented. So that part I agree that if you're an outsider, it's going to be very difficult to get in the middle of a what they call it, a good old boy network or something of that nature, and
yeah.
come in there. You keep in mind when Trump ran for office, he ran on a platform of I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to name names and get rid of people. You need those people to enact your legislation. You can't expect folks to help you when you're coming in talking about you're going to fire everybody, which is why you hear a lot of MAGA folks suggest that they gave Trump hell from day one. Well, your claim to fame was that you were going to be a snitch. People are not going to work with a snitch. Go ahead, sir.
Right. And so the second thing too, I believe it's a lot to do with what type of media people consume on their opinions of both the
True.
Black Lives Matter
Absolutely.
riots and according to what happened in January 6th. The first thing I started seeing just from the first news site that I looked into, it did seem to me as like, oh, look, there's people walking around. They have no idea what's really even going on. They're calm. They're like 50-year-old overweight people that are barely moving. Like how could this be an insurrection? But there are many other video evidence showing people breaking windows, climbing in through, throwing chairs around. And, there's obviously something else going on. And it's not just this peaceful, demonstration that people are saying. And another
Well,
point I want to make.
I'll let you make your second point. Let me talk on this one.
Yeah.
First of all, for folks who are not watching this and just boycotting it as a bunch of bullshit, what this gentleman just suggested about, we're being told it's a peaceful protest, they were being let in. If you watch the primetime coverage last Thursday or last week, there is undisputable evidence that there was plenty of violence happening and that they all were not let in. That is undeniable. You can dispute the evidence from the Capitol Police. You can dispute all the Republican politicians that were there. I assume you're going to dispute the video evidence as well. And that's what I'm talking about, having a preconceived notion of bias, whereas you believe Trump and nothing else is going to change your mind. Go ahead, sir.
Right. And now, as to the issue where people are saying, why are they making this such a big deal and they're not bringing up Black Lives Matter, riots and protests? Well, strictly on like a legal basis, what would the federal government have to do with individual states, individual cities, crimes that were committed? Why would there be a congressional hearing on a state's or a city's individual, prosecution of things that are happening? The January 6th insurrection, right, was a direct attack on the Capitol building, which is a federal building. So if there's going to be an investigation, it's going to be done federally. And the fact that there's so many other players, political players that could possibly have taken, some type of part in it, then yes, there needs to be a committee, and yes, there needs to be a hearing about it. So
That's
the
an
connection.
excellent, something, what you just suggested. I don't think I've ever brought that up, but that's an excellent point in regards to folks deferring to Antifa, Chaz, Black Lives Matter rallies or riots, rather, riots of 2020 is that those are state issues. That is 100% correct. When you go, well, why are you letting Black Lives Matter get away and making such a fuss over this? Then you have to blame the states. What happened on January 6th is a federal issue. What happened during the summer of 2020 was state, city, and local issues. That is a really good point, but continue.
So yeah, that's I think to make the comparison between the two is completely it just doesn't make sense on that level, number one. And number two, it's more of, like well, these people did this, and then why is it not okay for me to do it? Like you kind of brought up earlier, committing a crime and then saying, well, this other person committed a crime too. Two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, simple elementary school things to that. Now, my personal opinion on insurrection and stuff like that, I feel like it is our right as Americans to, if we feel that the government isn't representing us, to protest and to even if people felt that that's what they wanted to, that they weren't, their voices weren't being heard, and that there was something that they should do it. I just kind of think it was ridiculous. It was over Trump, and the evidence that was presented shows that hey, this there everybody, like they were saying before, everybody else was saying no. There's nothing that
Yeah,
happened that was illegal
yeah.
here. And so if everybody would get together and say, hey, the government's corrupt, the money is controlling everything, corporations are basically buying laws, let's all get together and just forget about all of our other differences and do that, I'd be 100% for that.
Fair,
I'll be in a car on the way to DC with you guys shortly if we all decide that.
fair enough. All right, well, let me move it on. I appreciate you coming through, man.
Yep, thanks, have a
All right,
great day,
take
everybody.
care. Take care. Right about the different, like I said, I brought it up before, but that is a really good point about what happened with Black Lives Matter and Chaz and all of that in the summer of 2020. It's a state issue, and bringing up what somebody else did at your trial, that doesn't even, I mean, well, what they did was worse than what I did. That'll never help your defense if I can get it out right. Okay, let me read the comments before I go to Big DM. A Ned by Pelosi. And folks, feel free to follow the channel. We don't have to agree. In fact, we will not always agree. It's a MAGA friendly zone. My preferred audience is MAGA. I'm going to get hammered. That happens here. But you get to speak. I'm willing to listen, and that's all I ask of you folks who are paying attention. MAGA is dead is now Ultra MAGA. I love it. I love it, Ultra MAGA. We'll see. That's what the title of this piece is. Is MAGA 2024 in jeopardy? Are they in jeopardy? I gotta keep saying, just because you're not watching this trial does not mean it is not happening. You may think it's a bunch of bullshit. A lot of folks in court around America get rounded up on trumped up trials, no pun intended, and they face bullshit. That don't mean they won't still go to jail. So I just want to say you should be watching it, because as a regular American, an average American citizen, you do not have access to all the information they do. But if you're already biased, then anything they present, you're going to say it's bullshit. So it is what it is. All right, moving on to the next caller, the Big DM. I agree, but you're too nice to the Trumpers. It's not about being nice. It's about letting folks get their right to free speech. And I want to hear them. I've learned a lot talking to MAGA. I really enjoy talking to MAGA. I prefer talking to MAGA. I want to hear him. The Big DM, good evening or good afternoon.
What's
What's up,
going
man?
on? How are you doing today?
Oh, MAGA. Have you been watching this?
I actually turned it on because you said to
Oh,
watch
shit.
it. So
Oh,
here
shit.
I am
Really?
right here watching it right now.
All right. Salute.
So
What do
so
you
since
think? What do you
you
think?
said to give it a chance, I'll give it a chance. But here's what I'm seeing. It's extremely biased. I think we can all agree on that. And I think
True.
that's the problem people have with all of this. I also heard a lot of the cases. I'm hearing lack of evidence. We dismissed that. We dismissed this in Arizona because it was lack of evidence. Well, what lack of evidence? I think that's where people are having a real issue with this. Is we're watching things like Steven Crowder. I think Steven Crowder really kicked all this off. He went around in Michigan, in Arizona, and followed up on some of these voter rolls and found that a lot of people must be living under bridges or in abandoned lots and stuff like that. So I think when people couple those things together and we're not openly giving all the information and we're just saying, it was dismissed, I
Well, let
think
me
that's
ask you
why
this.
people are having a real problem.
Let me interrupt and ask you this. Now, you pointed out that you believe the hearings are biased.
I think they're
Did you
biased.
think? Did you think 2,000 Mules was unbiased?
No, and I've told you that before. I think it was completely biased. I think I told you this last time we talked. I think 75% of it's bullshit. But I
Oh,
also think that if 15% of it is true, then that's pretty huge in my opinion.
fair enough. And I agree that what was presented on 2,000 Mules, in my opinion, was worthy of looking into by the higher authorities. I think that if I had to give you my point, my spiel coming from a liberal side, I think that Trump and probably Mike Lindell made the job of Dinesh D'Souza far more difficult. Because before Dinesh D'Souza came along with the notion of ballot harvesting, Trump was saying all kinds of shit from the ballots being found in rivers, dead people voting, illegals voting. I think he said Native Americans were being paid to vote. I mean, he literally threw up a laundry list of stuff against the wall to see what would stick. So by the time Dinesh D'Souza came along, all of the credibility towards what happened in the election had been greatly reduced because Trump released so much information that has been disproven, particularly with the Dominion voting machines. If you notice, most right-wing senators, right-wing media outlets, and things like that are not echoing most of the stuff that Trump suggested took place. None of the right wing folks who would actually benefit from it are echoing what he said. They've all, for the most part, suggested that what he's saying does not have enough proof for us to echo it. So go ahead.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying there. I think the biggest issue that people are taking from this, and I listened to the gentleman from Philadelphia here too, because I think that's one of the biggest cities where they had the most issues that they wanted to throw out there. The way that they rapidly changed voting laws really comes into play for a lot of people, I feel like, because you have all these always more popular. He's the most popular president of all time because due to the vote, blah, blah, blah. So you have that coupled with the way that they changed the voting laws. And I get, COVID,
Let me
whatever. I understand.
let me interrupt. That's a good point about them changing voting laws supposedly because of COVID. Let me ask you this. During the election, I believe the state of Texas sued the state of Pennsylvania because they changed the
Yep.
voting law. And at that time, if I'm correct, the governor of Montana stood up and asked or said I believe he said it on CNN or something like that. We made the same changes that Pennsylvania made, and yet they're not suing us because Trump won. Why is that? Now, that did not make big news, but the governor of Montana stated that they made the exact same changes that Pennsylvania made, and Trump supporters were able to use those changes and win in that state. And for some reason, when all of those states decided to sue Pennsylvania, they didn't sue Montana.
Well, I'll take it to this then. Back in 2016, the Democrats were complaining about how the election was stolen because their person didn't win. And oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And Russia had something to do with it. I swear it was Russia. Well, guess what's happened
as
now?
history is showing you, what the Democrats complained about in 2016 does not have any legitimacy or merit to it. That's what's probably going to happen with 2020 as well.
I agree.
Okay,
I agree
fair enough.
But I just find it funny how they both flopped when it came to 2020. It's like, oh, all of a sudden now the elections are fine.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like that. You never complain about it. When your guy wins, you don't want to talk about that. You only want to talk
here's the biggest problem I have about that. When Trump came on the scene, came down the escalator in 2015, he suggested it's rigged. That was his words. It's all rigged. Then, for some reason, out of the blue, he won in 2016, and it became, I won fair and square, let's move on. Which, first of all, you have to ask, how can you win a rigged election fair and square? But when you look from 2016, or 2015 rather, when he announced it was rigged, until 2020, when he supposedly stated it's stolen, who was in power? He was. So the question becomes, what did you do during the 4 years you were in office to fix an election which you suggested was rigged before you got in there? If the election is rigged, where's the legislation? What did you propose to fix the election while you were president? There has been more alterations to security elections, supposedly, since he has left office from the Republicans than there was when he was in office. Why is that?
I honestly don't know. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, in my opinion, this voter fraud runs parallel with the big tech argument. You know, you complained about big tech for 4 years, but you didn't do anything. Same with voter fraud. You complained for 4 years, but you didn't do anything. So you can't sit there and cry when you didn't do anything about it. That's my opinion. I don't really have a good answer for that. I don't know why they didn't do anything. I don't know why they didn't do anything about big tech. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me unless there's a special interest group out there that says, hey, shut your mouth, keep it closed. The only way.
Well, I will say this, and I got to move it on. I'll give you the last word, but I will say, in regards to special interests, I think if you look at the behavior from President Trump, it is pretty clear that, at least from my own opinion, your humble correspondent here, yours truly. Now, I understand my audience may have a different opinion, and you're entitled to that. But I believe, based on what I've seen from Trump, that he planned to suggest that the election was fraudulent at any point in time he lost. If you look at, like I said, in 2016, he had made it clear, if I lose, I'm not going to necessarily admit the results. I'm not going to necessarily concede. They had everybody on stage, the other 17 Republicans, and they asked them all, if you lose, would you concede? Would you support the nominee? And Trump was the only one then. In 2016, then he was the only one saying, I might not work with any of these dudes. So when he did it in 2020, it should not necessarily be a shock, because he made it clear. And even look at the election that he was in favor of, the Dr. Oz election, where once again it was a very close election. And he was telling Dr. Oz to stand up before the votes are even finished counting and say you won. And his party, the Trump administration, was already starting to suggest that there was cheating coming from other GOP candidates in Pennsylvania, even though both Dr. Oz and his competitor were suggesting there is no cheating taking place. So he was even alleging that in Pennsylvania. So it's starting to look like that might be his method of operation. But I could be wrong. I'll give you the last word.
No, I think you're completely right. I mean, we saw him do it in business, but you know what? Businessmen, that's what they do. They talk louder than everybody else. They make deals. And guess what? If I've got the bigger dick in the room, I'm winning. And that's how it is. And he carried that. And that's what people loved about him, is he carried that into the presidency also. Some people who don't like negotiation didn't like it a whole lot. But people who understand business, I think that's why they gravitated towards him. And that's why they liked him so much. But that's really all.
All right, well, appreciate you coming back through, man.
All right, good appreciate it, my man.
Hey, you too. Take care. Okay, looking at the comments Right back to the box again. I see Michael said, what do you say? Hillary Clinton did the same thing. Historically, Hillary Clinton is going to go down in history as any claims of saying that the election of 2016 was unfair. Historically, she doesn't have the support of that. That's all I'm saying. And when it comes to Trump, he's going to go down in history as suggesting an election was taken from him that's not true. And then all of that January 6th stuff is going to be tied to him. I understand my audience is going to believe that it was a peaceful protest. It was a love fest. It was actually Antifa and Black Lives Matter. You pick whatever you want to put in there to defend them. That's fine. That's what you're going to say. But history is not going to judge that fairly. My guess is, and here's where I may be wrong, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, free speech. My guess is once Trump is out of the way, whether he's out of politics and has less of an influence or passes away, whatever, you're going to have a lot more Republican senators, Republican politicians stepping up and saying that, yeah, we knew this was bullshit, but we were riding the wave. That's what my opinion is. I might be wrong, but I absolutely believe that as time goes on, and right now he is the man. He is all powerful within the Republican Party. It is not in your best interest as a Republican politician to speak ill of Trump. But once he is no longer in influence, I do believe you're going to have a lot more Republicans stepping up, writing books, and admitting that they believe that what he suggested was never true from the beginning. Okay, let me go into the comment. Pokey, did we just talk? Give me a second. I think we just spoke. Looking at here. You wrong, more will be like Trump. There's not enough room for more people to be like Trump. There's just no room for that. If you become Trump and you win, I don't personally believe that Trump would have been happy with 2 terms. I might be wrong, but I believe Trump would have served his second term and he would have probably tried to get Donald in there, Ivanka, or somebody who's handpicked. There's no room for another Trump. It's going to become a dynasty of sorts. I don't think he would have left room for any of that. Watch PSYOP. The still shows Antifa, the Proud Boys, and Lincoln Project was all in it together. Who is the producer of what do you say, SPSYOP? Is it a Dinesh D'Souza type production? Is it unbiased? Whereas when you're looking at what's taking place with the trial that's on TV right now, even if you're presenting it from a standpoint of being biased, at least there are Republicans in there. Now, you may say Liz Cheney is as biased as they can get, but make no mistake about it, Liz Cheney is not a liberal. There's not a liberal bone in Liz Cheney's body. Same thing with Attorney Barr. So they do have right-wingers coming up. And in fact, not only do they have right-wingers, several of them were appointed and or hired by Trump. If I watch PSYOP, am I going to see a bunch of Democrats that were appointed by Biden giving speeches in favor of Trump? Or am I just going to see a bunch of right-wingers saying that the man is innocent? That's what I'm asking. Okay, looking at the comments. Trump did show us how dumb people can be. Okay, I'm not going to disagree with that. Liz Cheney is a neocon. Then why does the state of Wyoming keep hiring her over and keep electing her over and over again? Explain that. Just came on. What do you mean MAGA's in jeopardy? Very curious. Please explain. 3 Beasts. The question I'm asking, based on what we're seeing in regards to the trial in regards to January 6th, I won't call it an insurrection because that is not what the courts have officially ruled. But in regards to the protest, which everyone refers to it at least as that, has that now, the events of that day, put a resurgence of MAGA in 2024 in jeopardy? That is what we're asking. Now, I understand my audience primarily being MAGA. There's a hell of a lot of you that are not even watching what's taking place. And I'm simply suggesting that you cannot make an educated opinion if you're not hearing the evidence that the other side is presenting. Maybe you think it's 100% bullshit. Maybe it is, but you need to hear it first. Just like I appreciate my MAGA audience for not looking at my name and just assuming all the shit I'm saying is biased and tuning me out. The fact that you're here, you're starting to hear me, and I do hold a few thousand folks that regularly show up, and you're starting to understand that even though his name is that, everything he says is not bullshit. That's what I'm asking you to do when it comes to the trial. And if at the end of the trial you still feel like it's bullshit, that is your right. That is your right as a law-abiding citizen, a member of this society to think that. But at least listen to it. And Zig 5000, you're saying he can't win? Perhaps he may be in that situation. But if they are truly presenting bullshit information, why aren't there more Republican senators and Republican Congress folks like Ted Cruz or some of them stepping up and saying none of this stuff coming out of this is true? Are we going to believe that 100% of Republican politicians in this country are all rhinos? Like you can't trust anybody, right? Only person that's actually legit out of the entire nation is Trump? That doesn't make any sense. Why is so many Republicans not saying the same thing Trump is saying? In some cases, not even backing him up. And in other cases, like Jim Barr, saying it's outright bullshit. You can't call everybody a rhino. You can't say everybody is in the bag. I mean, at some point, I don't care if it's your damn mom. At some point, when it becomes overwhelming that the people telling you something negative about it, you have to look at mom and say, is all this true? I can't dismiss every damn body. So I'm just simply asking. You can take the liberals out of the picture. I get it. You can take CNN and MSNBC out of the picture. But look at how the right wing themselves, the Republican senators, Republican congresspersons, folks who are on the Trump administration, listen to what they're saying. They're not speaking favorably of Trump. Why is that? Media, the right-wing media not touting 2,000 Mules as proof that the election was stolen. Why is that? Pokey Talk time. Good afternoon.
Hey, sorry, I just wanted to jump back in because I'm like reading the comments and stuff like that. I guess my biggest thing is how people could still maintain like, a party when if you look, for instance, just look before the pandemic really hit and we started going into lockdowns. If you look at specific politicians on both sides of the fence, they made stock trades. They were doing stock trades because they knew about what was going to happen before it happened because they were having discussions about it, and they made so much money off of it on both sides. And if you look every single time, Democrat majority, they're hardly holding up any of the promises that they have made to anybody. And the same thing happens with the Republicans. Trump is in the office. He spent 2 years where the excuse was, this Russia thing. Then he kind of squeaked a few things by, and then he was gone. Like, how long are we going to all argue left, right, exactly like they want us to, until we finally say, hey, nobody in Congress is doing what we need them or want them to do, until we finally get to the point and say, let's put our political differences aside and go in there and say, hey, our voice isn't being heard at all, and make some real effective change.
Well, let me interrupt you. I get what you're saying, but I guess respectfully, that's a different argument. Right now, we're trying to get to the bottom of what took place on January 6th. And the question is, was Trump culpable, or was it just something that kind of formulated on its own, and the people who did it are the ones we hold accountable and view Trump as a totally innocent party to what took place? That's what we're focused on right now. I get that Congress is ineffective. I get that the country is divided. All of that is true. But that's a different argument for a different discussion. Right now, we're trying to find out what the hell happened on January 6th and who is at fault for it.
True. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to throw that in there. I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good one.
I'll see you later. You too. See you later. Yeah, so right now, we're trying to find out. We can talk about Black Lives Matter and how they got away with all of the bullshit they did. I'm not defending setting a Best Buy on fire or robbing a CVS or vice versa, however the hell they did. I'm not defending that. But when you're at the January 6th hearings, bringing up shit that took place 1,000 miles away is not going to save Trump. It's irrelevant to that case. Every single case in America could feature a defendant bringing up how somebody else did the same shit and got away with it. That could be brought up at every single trial. How many drug users serving the rest of their lives in prison could use Robert Downey Jr. as a defense for why they shouldn't be locked up? He was caught with lots of smack on him. And he didn't serve any time like a lot of the folks on the lower end of the socioeconomical end of the scale, particularly minorities, are serving a ton of time. They're not going to listen to that shit in trial. So why bring it up? Okay, looking at the comments, Republicans could have, what does this say? Republicans could have been honest about Black Lives Matter and helped them. Problem solved. How? Laughing is medicine. Republicans could have been honest about Black Lives Matter and helped them. Problem solved. Republicans, just being honest, Republicans tend to be more pro-police than Democrats do. Democrats tend to be more pro-minority than Republicans do. So at the end of the day, if Republicans were to be honest about Black Lives Matter or even side with Black Lives Matter, it kind of puts the police on the lurch. And I don't think the cops would have liked that. So that's probably why you're not going to get what you're suggesting. Who called the insurrectionists to Washington, D.C. and pointed him to the Capitol? That I'm assuming you're talking about Trump suggesting that he wanted everybody to come to Washington. Come out here, it's going to be wild, I believe he tweeted. And then after the speech, he suggested, let's all go to the Capitol building and I'll be right there with you. I believe that's what you're talking about. Let's go back to the box. Tik Tok, Q, Pate. Go back to the box. Bringing them on. Good afternoon, Tik Tok.
Hey, what's going on, boss?
Nothing at all. What's on your mind?
Hey, you been to j6truth.org yet?
No, I have not. j6truth.org.
Go check it out. There's a documentary on there that's showing some of the footage that hasn't been released yet. It's about 45 minutes long. Where'd they get it from? What's that?
Where did they get the footage from?
It's all open source.
Okay. So have you watched what's going on right now as far as the actual trial?
I've watched the highlights.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is because they're releasing
how many people do you know of that